I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to create an energy gauge with Kwik Model 3D project, presented by Jeff Myron, that's myself, with the HVAC Energy Research Center. We also have joining us Russell King, mechanical engineer from Coded Energy, the developers of Kwik Model 3D. So what is Kwik Model 3D, or KM3D for short? For those who are not familiar with it, it's a new feature in Energy Gauge USA. It is a fast, efficient, and fun 3D user interface that we think gamers are really going to love. It provides a quick way to build a house with a patent-pending process using scalable 3D building blocks. And in the end, it provides a 3D view of your home, which is very unique and not currently available in Energy Gauge. In the end, also, the building envelope geometry is then translated directly from Kwik Model into Energy Gauge. And the 3D entry option is optional, and you can still enter your data using the traditional method in Energy Gauge. So an overview of today's webinar will give you a brief introduction of the new feature. Then, most importantly, we'll go on to a demo where we'll actually show the step-by-step process of entering the building in Kwik Model with 3D. And just as mentioned earlier, this is interactive. Please submit your questions over the chat, and we'll be happy to try and answer those during the demo. And again, to just indicate to everyone that this section is being recorded and will be made available at the end of the webinar. Okay, so as an introduction, Energy Gauge with Kwik Model 3D is all-inclusive in a single software install and activated with your single license key. Departure from the typical file format where we just had an EMB file, we now actually have a project folder. And inside that project folder, you'll find the EMB file, the 3D JSON file, and the floor plan file, which you'll see is imported initially as your setup. All three of those components are in one folder, and that's stored inside the Energy Gauge backup folder, which you're all familiar with. In addition to the project folder, we have two new features. You have the ability to save that and to load it as a zip file. So therefore, it's just one file which you can easily share. Well, why don't we jump in and let the games begin? And with that, we'll jump over to Russ's, if you can just give us a moment. Okay, so you can see on the project search page, there are a couple new features here. One is the create new 3D project. The other is to load the zip file, as I mentioned earlier. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and create a new 3D project. Energy Gauge opens, looks the same. You won't see any difference at this point, except on the bottom right, there's a little save and launch Kwik Model 3D. So up here, there are a couple inputs that are required prior to transitioning over to Kwik Model. I'm just going to use today's date in this case. And we'll just use a simple address, city, state is required, and the zip code. So with that, actually, if you forget any of these, why don't we just demonstrate this? You'll just have a little message here to prompt you to enter the missing data. And with that, all you have to do is select Save and Launch Kwik Model. And many of you have already probably tried this. And you're transitioned directly into Kwik Model 3D. And Russ, why don't you take over?
Awesome, thanks. Well, hi, everyone. I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Russ King, and I'm the CEO of Coded Energy, Inc. We're the developers of Kwik Model 3D. It's a 3D environment. It's actually a 3D world. There's a ground that's green. There's a blue sky. There's a sun up in the sky, and you'll see this. There's a north arrow there indicating which direction is north. And this little square that you see here is where we're going to place our floor plans, okay? One of the things to point out here is across the top, there are, we call these tabs. We have project info. This is where your project name and things like that comes in. All that information is carried over from what you entered into Energy Gauge, and then it's brought here. And if you make any changes in here, well, you can't make changes to these, but any changes that you can make in here will be brought back to Energy Gauge once you go back to Energy Gauge. Let's see, a couple important things to point out here is down on the bottom here is a condition floor plan area. You can enter what you expect the condition floor area of the house to be. Let's say on the architectural plans, it says this house is, 2,752 square feet. You can type that number in here. And then as you build the house in 3D, down here on the bottom where it says from drawing, it'll tell you what it's getting. And so you can compare the two numbers to make sure that they correspond correctly. So the particular house we're going to do is a really simple one. It's just 600 square feet. So it's 20 by 30. I'm going to go ahead and type that in here, and we'll come back later and double check that. The tabs across the top, there's libraries is where you would enter all your sort of stored information about what we call types. So you've got wall types, you've got window types, you've got room types and things like that. That's where you can store all that information and then quickly make changes later on. You'll have default types. So when you build a wall, it will create those walls under the default type, and then you can come back later and change those walls. If let's say one wall is different than the rest, you can change those very easily by picking a different type and not have to type in all the R values and things like that. The floor plan tab is where you tell the software about the house. It's where you the big stuff like the wall heights and things like that. It's where you import your floor plan, and we'll do a demonstration of that in just a minute. Field Draw is a special feature. We're not going to talk about that today, but it is a special feature that allows you to create a 3D model of an existing house in the field while you're out at the house. So as you're measuring the house, you draw the perimeter, and then you can build the house in the software, in the field. Rooms is where you place rooms, and something we'll talk about later, but you can either build your model room by room if you're going to do room by room load calculations, which are necessary to design ducts and things like that. But if you're just doing a simple energy model and you don't need it to be built in room by room, you don't have to. You just call the house one big room, and you just build it out of blocks, and you call it all just one big room. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. There's a tab to enter windows. There's a tab for HVAC draw. We're probably not going to get to that today, except to place an air handler. But this is where it has the ability to draw 3D ductwork. It can draw flex duct really, really well. It can draw sheet metal, rectangular, round ducts, and things like that as well. And that's to me one of the funnest parts. There's a tab in here to actually draw roofs. We don't require that you draw a roof. If you want to draw a roof to make the model look more realistic, you can. But in terms of modeling and things like that, there's just a few simple inputs that you need to do for roofs. A lot happens in the data tab. That's where every time you draw a room, it calculates the areas of all those surfaces. When two rooms touch each other, it knows that the walls where those rooms touch are not conditioned, between conditioned and unconditioned space. So it ignores them. So every time you add a room, it changes all the geometry of the house. So your room sizes, your floor areas, your wall types, your window types, that's all going to appear under the data tab. The friction rate tab, when you do get into the manual D stuff, that's where the friction rate tab comes into play. And then we have a few free draw features if you want to draw exhaust fans or something like that, just to pretty up the drawing. It doesn't do any calculations on those in the free draw stuff. But if there's things that you want to add just to make your drawings more realistic or more informative, there's some tools there in free draw. Okay. So let's go to the libraries tab next. So once you get your project information in there, then you just kind of follow along these tabs in sequential order. So we'll go to the libraries tab next. And this is where you store all the different assemblies, okay? So you'll see up here, there's tables for windows, walls, doors, floors, ceilings. There's some room types, there's some roof types, and then there's some duct types, okay? So this is where you can store all of these libraries that you may want to reference, that you may want to choose from for future projects. The software comes with some basic default ones. And so I'm in the Windows table right now, and you'll see it comes with 5 different kinds of dual pane windows, vinyl, low E, and vinyl metal clear windows. Okay. Now you can edit these, you can add to them, and you can export these libraries and save them and then import them back into future projects. Okay. So if I wanted, let's say I had a house that had, one strange window in it, I could just highlight any one window and hit copy, and it creates a clone down here in the bottom. And then I can put in a new name and give it some new features, and then that will show up later on when we start applying windows. Now, for each library, you're going to have what's called the default type. And it's a little hard to see, but if you look, this first row is highlighted in green. There's a little green outline around it. And that means that's the default type. And so when I create a new window in the drawing, it's going to assign that default type to it. So every new window I create from now on is going to be whatever the default type is. Okay. And I can change that halfway through the project. And so if let's say the first floor is one kind of window and then the second floor is a different kind of window, after I build the first floor, I can switch to a new default type by just selecting it and say set type is default. And now that second row is highlighted in green. So every new window I create after that will be the new type. Okay. But I'm going to leave it as the first one there. And then you can, if you create a whole bunch of windows, let's say you use a certain brand of windows a lot, or a particular builder has a certain type of window they use all the time, and you create those windows and you don't want to have to recreate them every time you start a new project, you can export this library, you can save it someplace on your hard drive, and then when you come start a new project, you can import all the libraries. Actually, you can import all the libraries that you've saved into a new project, and then they'll all be there for you to select from. Okay. So we've got window types. You'll see there's a whole bunch of different performance values for windows. You got the interior shades, manual 8J, 8 shades, the type of glass, the frame, any kind of screening, storm windows, all kinds of stuff in here that you can change. And all of this information carries back over into Energy Gauge. So when you do your compliance runs or HERS runs or whatever, that information will carry back into there. Okay. So that's windows. Under walls, we've got a bunch of different kinds of very common wall types. When you see something like this, R13 plus 4, that means there's R13 in between the studs and then an R4 rigid foam insulation on the outside of the studs. So a sheathing insulation. And you can kind of see that over here. That's interesting. That says 12. So one of the things to be careful with is that this wall type name is purely just a text file. It's just a text screen or a text field. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a reference. Okay. So just because it says 2x4 R13 doesn't mean that that's really a 2x4 R13 wall, because it may say something different over here. So be careful. I just want to warn you that that's, be careful that if you come over here and change this R19 to say something else, you want to make sure you come back and change the name as well. Okay. Or give it a generic name like wall 1, wall 2, or something like that, so that you don't accidentally have that happen. So just be aware of that. So walls, we got several different kinds of walls. We got one door in there. You can make new doors, different kinds of floor types, different kinds of ceilings. Oops, let me go back to the floors real quick. These on the floors, this has actually been updated. For each floor type, slab on grade, R19 over crawl, R30 over crawl space, there's 3 types of surfaces you can have, and it wants to know a percent of each surface. So what percent is carpet, what percent is tile, what percent is hardwood, okay? And you just want to make sure that those add up to 1. These 3 columns have to add up to 1 for each particular floor type. And so I just fixed that real quick. We've got some ceiling types. Under attic, cathedral ceilings. There's some ceiling styles in here. We're going to actually add some new ones here pretty soon. I think there'll be 5 or 6 new, 5 or 6 total that you can choose from to just kind of clarify the different types. It's got the R value, the truss type, and all that good stuff. There are some room types already in here. These are all you're really going to need. For manual J and for determining target mechanical ventilation and things like that, you need to know how many bedrooms are in a house. You need to know kitchens, which one is the kitchen. There's some internal loads associated with kitchens and things like that. So the types of rooms, each room you create, you're going to assign a type, and it's mainly bedrooms, kitchen, or other are the main types. There is a place to assign a room that's in a basement, okay, and that does some special calculations on it. So I'll show you where that happens. Roof types, all you really need is a default roof type, just one default roof type in here. There's one other place where you'll enter the slope of the roof, and I'll show you that. You can draw roofs in Kwik Model, but they're purely visual. They're just, they're just there for just to make the house look complete by putting a roof on it. When you draw a roof, it doesn't really do anything to the calculations. It's purely visual, but there are some performance information that Energy Gauge needs to know, and those are right here in this default roof. Whether you draw one or not, it's going to use this default roof, okay? And then duct types, when you get into manual D, it needs to know some of these factors that affect like our friction rate calculations and sizing ducts and things like that. So you can set those here as well, okay? So let's go next to floor plan. And so I clicked on floor plan, and this grid pops up in the background. You can barely see it. I'll zoom in on it, and you'll see there's these squares here. And each one of these squares is a 1 foot square. So that's 12 inches. Sure. Okay. And so in this floor plan mode here, this is our little menu up here. Here's your choices. And you'll notice that they have these little numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are actually shortcuts. So if I want to go to scale floor plan, I can either click on it here with my mouse, or I can just hit the number 3 key and it automatically jumps there. So you'll see a lot of menus have these numbers on here. There's a kind of mouse you can buy that where your thumb rests on your mouse, there's actually a number key there. They call it a gamer mouse, but I'm sure it's used for other things too. And so you can actually use shortcuts. So having to, instead of move your mouse way over and click on one of these things, you just click on that button on your mouse and it'll automatically select the which tool you want to use here. So we're going to start off on elevations. Elevations is basically a side view of the house. If you look at a set of architectural plans, the sheets that are called elevations are looking at the sides. And so we have this little elevation, this little mini elevation down here. And this is where you set your room heights and things like that, your floor thickness. So it comes set default with 8 foot ceiling heights. So this right here is 8 feet. The floor thickness is 1/2 foot. So we're just going to say this example is a 6-inch slab on grade. Okay. And then if you want to, you can add a truss heel as well. If you want to make this a 2-story house, you just click the add floor button and you'll notice that it becomes a little 2-story elevation. And you can say the first floor is 10 feet plate heights and the second floor is 8 feet plate heights or 9 foot plate heights, whatever you want to do. And then the thickness between the floors is 1 foot. So you can set all that information here. So as you're building the house, that's what it will default to. Now you can change those things later on individual rooms. Let's say your house has all 10-foot ceilings, but some of the rooms are only 9-foot ceilings. You build the house as all 10-foot ceilings and then go into those individual rooms and shrink them down to make those 9-foot ceilings. So this is just telling it, when you place a block, how tall is that block going to be as you build the house? And then you can always change that later on individually. So I'm going to delete that top floor because our example is just a 1-story house. The next thing I'm going to do is click on import floor plan, and it's going to open up a little file browser. Okay. And it's going to look at all, you can look around for it, and it's looking for any kind of image file, including PDF files. I caution you, when you use a PDF file, not to use a gigantic PDF file. Sometimes an architect will send you an entire plan set as one PDF file. Don't import that entire plan set. What I highly suggest you do, just to make the software run faster, is to open that PDF file in Adobe Acrobat or whatever, and take a screen snip of just the part of the floor plan that you need. You don't need all the notes and stuff like that around the outside. You just want the floor plan and some of the dimensions of the floor plan. So that's what I recommend that you do, but you can import a PDF file. It's just if you import a giant PDF file, it's going to make the software run a lot slower, because when you turn the house to look at it, it's manipulating that entire file, not just what you see. Okay, so be careful with that. So I'm going to import this little floor plan right here. It's a very simple little floor plan, and I open it up, and then it puts it on the ground, if you will. Okay, and I think at this point, let's talk about some of the controls. Okay, so if you use the right key on your mouse, you can change the perspective, that we call it the camera angle that you're looking from. Okay, and so if you want to just spin it around and look from different angles like that. But we also have these shortcut keys up here: front, right, back, and left. So if I look at it from the right, it'll immediately jump to looking straight from the right. If I click on back, it'll immediately jump to the back. Actually, I'll wait until we get the little house built. It'll be a little bit, make a little bit more sense. The middle mouse button, which would be your wheel. If you notice your wheel on your mouse, if you press on it, it's actually a button, and it holds down. So if you want to slide to the left and to the right, use the middle mouse. Okay. And another thing to point out is this little slider up here where it says camera speed. If I slide that all the way to the right and I speed up the camera speed, everything moves faster. Okay, when I zoom in, it moves faster. And if I move it back to where it was and I zoom in, it doesn't zoom in quite as fast. So it kind of controls the, the speed and sort of the precision of how things move when you control it with your mouse. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go to top view. So I'm looking straight down now. And what I need to do is I need to scale this floor plan. So remember, these little squares in the back are 1 foot squares. I need to make it so that our floor plan matches those 1 foot squares. So in this 3D world, we're actually creating a life-size a life-size floor plan of this house, if you will. And so you'll notice some dimensions on here. You'll see this is 30 feet across here. So we want to make it so that this back wall is 30 of these squares. And then you'll see this vertical dimension here is 20 feet. So clearly that this house looks square, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be 30 by 20. So it's definitely not to scale. We need to make it to scale. All right. And that's very simple. You click on the next one here, scale floor plan, and these two arrows pop up here, this red horizontal arrow and this blue vertical arrow. All you have to do is get those arrows to line up with any dimension on the floor plans. The other thing I'm going to do real quick is there's a button up here. You can barely read it. It says 2D view. I'm going to go into 2D. You're not going to notice a big difference, but what it does is it takes out what we call the parallax of having a 3D image. It just flattens everything. It makes it a little easier to work with at this point. It helps me line up these arrows here. And so I've got this red arrow. I'm going to line it up as close as I can to this point. And then over here, same thing on this side. Now those arrows should represent 30 feet. So I just go right down here to where it says X scale, and I type in 30, and I click scale. And now it's made that distance 30 feet in our virtual world, okay? And if I were to count those little squares, there would be 30 of those. Now I just need to do the same thing with the vertical scale or the Y scale. So I click on that, I drag it down, bring it down to there. Type in 20, hit scale. Now our drawing is to scale, okay? The other thing we want it to do is we want it to line up with the grid in the background. So I go to the move floor plan, and now I can move it in relation to the background. And I'm looking at this upper left-hand corner here, and I'm just going to get it to line up with the grid in the background. And by the way, there's some controls down here. If you want to lighten or darken the floor plan, you'll see there's a floor plan slide down here. If I slide it to the right, the floor plan gets more opaque. And if I slide it to the left, it gets more clear. And so I can use that to really align it more precisely with this grid in the background here, okay? Okay, so now if I were to count those squares, there should be 30 of them across there and 20 of them down here. So now our drawing is to scale, okay? All right, there's also a tool on here. If the floor plan that you import has a lot of stuff on it that you don't want to see, there's some tools in there. You can crop it, you can stretch it. There's some manipulation tools in there to help with your drawing. But like I said, I found that if you just take a screen snip and then import that snipped file is usually the best way to do it. Okay, but we do have extra tools in case you need them. All right, so now we've got our drawing in here and it's been scaled. The next thing to do is to now start building our house. And so I'm going to go to the Rooms tab here. And it brings up this menu. Again, it has the shortcut keys, okay? And it always starts off in Move and Scale. And then it starts off, defaults to a rectangular room, which is basically just a box, okay? But we do have a lot of different kinds of rooms because not all rooms are rectangles. A lot of them are, you know, like a bay window is made up of 2 triangles and a rectangle. And so you can build pretty much whatever shape you can think of. The only thing we don't have is a true round room. If you have a house with a round room, you have to make it out of wedges, and it gets close enough. It's all about the surface area, but it's close enough. But we've got triangles. You can do vaulted ceilings, rectangular ceilings, an upside down vaulted ceiling, which we've occasionally run into, a pyramid shaped ceiling, quarter pyramids for like behind a gable window on a sloped roof. There's a little weird pyramid that shows up behind those, and then a roof ceiling box. Okay, let's see. So I'm just going to start off. This is a very simple example that we're going to do. So I'm just going to start off with rectangular rooms, and you can set the default size. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click my mouse right there, and it places a room. That room is 10 by 10 because that's what the default is set to. Okay, and then you just move it around, and it's a little dark. I want to be able to see through it, so I'm going to go down here to rooms. I'm going to make it a little lighter so I can see the floor plan through it a little bit better, like so. Okay, I just drag it around, and I'm going to get it to line up with the exterior walls, and these blue and red things are handles. So I'm just going to stretch it out to line up with the room. Okay, and now I've basically created a kitchen and dining room. I'm going to do this example as a room by room. Okay, if this was just one simple house and you weren't doing it room by room, it would be as simple as making one box that covers that entire house. Now you've got your front wall, your left wall, your back wall, your floors, your roof, everything's there. That's all you need. Now, most houses aren't this basic, so you would have to build it out of several blocks, but at least you don't have to do it room by room. But I'm going to do it room by room just to show you how quick and easy it is to even do it that way. So here's that first room is done. Okay. It defaults to conditioned. We have some choices here under condition. It can be a conditioned room, an unconditioned room like a garage. It can be earth. If you're doing a basement and you want to show that that basement has dirt on the outside of it, you create dirt rooms, earth rooms, and you slide that up against the wall. Now the software knows that that wall is a below grade wall, and you can change the height of that dirt too. So a room or a wall could be partially below grade or entirely below grade by changing the height of that earth on the outside. We have other conditioned and other unconditioned spaces. If you're doing a model, let's say you're doing only half of a duplex, the part of the wall that's shared with the other duplex is going to be ignored. There's no heat transfer through there. You're not doing anything with that other duplex. And so you would just say that wall is other conditioned space. So you just put a box there to represent that other duplex that you're basically ignoring. And by putting it there, the software now knows any rooms adjacent to it are just to ignore that wall. Okay. All right, let's see. And then as we place these blocks, you can group them together. If you have a room that's a very complicated shape and it takes 4 or 5 or 6 boxes to make that room, you highlight all those boxes and click the group key, and it will group them all together, and it will just call all those boxes one single room. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna do this next room here. We got bedroom 1, and you'll notice it has a walk-in closet in here. I could either just do this one room, and so now I put on my HVAC design hat, and I said, you know, I'm not gonna put a supply register in this walk-in closet, so there's really no need to make that walk-in closet one single room, but I certainly could just by doing something like that. Now my bedroom, I'm gonna need 2 boxes to create this bedroom, like so. By the way, if you click too close to another room, like I'm about to do, they turn pink. And what that means is they're overlapping. And so all you have to do to make that pink go away is to drag it away. And now when you drag it back, we call that colliding. I can't overlap those 2 rooms. They bump into each other. And that makes it much, much easier to build your house. So I'm gonna drag this in here like so. Okay, now I've got this walk-in closet, and if I want to call these 2 boxes here as bedroom 1, I click on one, I hold down the shift key, click on the other, and then I hit group, and now those 2 are grouped into one. And you can tell by when you drag it, they stick together like that. Okay, so those are going to be treated as one room. Okay, so if I wanted to do it that way, I could, but let's say I don't need to. So I'm just going to make this one big room like so. And I'm going to go ahead and do this one down here. So now this bath here, there's a little hallway here. I'm going to go ahead and throw this hallway in with the bath. There, now I've just built that house out of those rooms. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms, and each room has walls and ceilings associated with it, okay? If I wanted to put a garage on this house, I would just click it out here, however big it needs to be, and then click on unconditioned. And because it's a garage, we want to tell the software that it's a garage, and there's a little checkbox down here that says garage. So when I check that, now the software knows that that's a garage, and it's a different color, so you know that it's being modeled as unconditioned space. Now here's the cool part. If I take as out of 2D view by unchecking that, there's our house. And remember earlier in the elevations, I said everything was 8-foot ceilings, so those are going to be 8 foot tall. Okay, it's got a garage on it. I'm going to go ahead and delete that garage because our example doesn't have one. Okay, so there's our house. So now the software knows the size of each of these walls, and in the data tab, it's tabulating all those areas. It's creating wall names. It's giving them the default wall types. We'll get to that in just a second. The next step is to now put windows on here. And so you'll see in the plans, there's these windows, 6040, 2020. Those are pretty standard architectural nomenclature for windows. You'll see them written slightly differently, maybe 6/0, X4/0 or something like that. But it basically means 6 feet, 0 inches wide by 4 feet, 0 inches tall. Very common architectural nomenclature, okay? And so if I want to place a window, I go to the Windows tab, and we have windows and doors, okay? Very simple. You can set a default height if you want to, but you're gonna type in the height anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. So all you do is you hold down the Alt key and then just drag to the approximate width of what it shows on the plans. And this little table down here shows up. And I can just say it's a 6040 window, hit enter, and now that's 6 foot by 4 foot, okay? The other thing to tell it is how far down from the top it is. I'm just gonna say 1 foot. Okay, so it's 1 foot down from the top. So there's a 6040 window. Okay, now we've got a 3068 door. Click on doors. It defaults to 3068, so that's handy. So I'm going to place a door there. Okay, you notice it's a different color. Go back to windows. We've got a 2020. Type that in, 2020, 1 foot down. There's a 4040. Even if I don't line it up precisely, let's say I make it way too big, it doesn't really matter because I'm going to come back here and tell it the size anyways, 4040. That's 1 foot down. Okay. And now here's where these quick view buttons up here really are easier to demonstrate. So now I'm looking at it from the front, I click the front button. If I click the right, looking at it from the right side, there's the back, there's the left, and back to the front. Okay. Or you can just use your mouse and just kind of spin the house around using your mouse like so. There's no windows on this side of the house. I'll go ahead and go to the back here. I see a 4040 window. Put that in real quick. 4040. Let's say it's 1 foot down. Got another door there. Place a door. And then I'm going to use the left button and go to the left side real quick. Oops, too far. Oops. Got to take it out of doors. Back to Windows. 4030. Enter. 1 foot down. Okay, let's go back to the front. And there we go. Our house is done. We've got our walls, our floors, our windows. Everything's in there that we need, and it's all done room by room. I can do this house in from start to scratch in literally 3 minutes. I can build this house room by room. Okay. Now the cool thing is that it looks like the plans, right? If you have a set of architectural plans that has, floor plans, that has elevations and stuff, you're looking at a 3D model that looks like what the plans are you're working from. That helps a lot with confidence. It helps a lot with accuracy. It means that, as opposed to looking at a whole bunch of tables of wall areas and floor areas, it means it's a lot easier to check your work because it looks like what you're working with. So that 3D visualization, not only is it kind of cool from a HVAC design standpoint, but it's really, really handy from a plan check perspective, from a QA/QC perspective, and giving new users confidence that what they're building is really representative of what they're modeling, okay, what they're supposed to be modeling. All right, so now I'm going to skip over here. I'm going to go to the data tab and show you that just by simply building these little blocks, it's done all those takeoffs for us. So let me go to data. So here's all the different tables. It starts off with rooms, okay? So here's our rooms, and it named those rooms for us automatically, just assigned names, condition room 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now, you'll notice that the numbers are out of sequence. It names the rooms in the order that you create them on the floor plan. And if you remember, I was showing you how to do that walk-in closet, and I did the bedroom 1 as 2 different blocks. Well, it named those rooms, but then I went back and deleted them. That's why rooms 3, 4, and 5 are missing, because I deleted them, and it just continued the numbering sequence, just so you know that that's why it is. But you need to come back here and rename them anyways. So I'm going to look down from the top, and another cool feature is when you click on a name in the table, it highlights it in the drawing, okay? And vice versa as well. If I click on this room, bed 1, it highlights it in the table. So that's a good way to say, all right, which room is this? Okay, so I'm going to do kitchen and dining as the first one. So I'm just going to name that Kit Dine for short. The next one is bed 1. I'm going to name that bed 1. Living family, LIVFAM, bath. And the last one is bed 2. Okay, so I just went in and named those. Now, those names will show up in a lot of different places. Okay, so it's good to use relatively accurate names. And then look what it does. We don't have a system or block put in yet. We will in just a second. It'll tell you what zone it is. It'll tell you the floor areas. It tells you the volume. And then here's where you assign room types. So the kitchen and dining, that was a kitchen. Bedroom 1 is a bedroom. Living family is other, bath is other, and bed 2 is a bedroom, okay? And let's see, we can sprinkle in some occupants if we want to do it this way. The general rule of thumb for occupants is number of bedrooms plus 1. So there's 2 bedrooms, so that would be 3. For HVAC design purposes, I generally put the occupants in whatever room they're going to be most likely be in the afternoon during the hottest part of the day. And so I'm going to put 2 in the family room and maybe 1 in the kitchen, okay? And so it's going to put in a little bit of extra internal loads into those rooms. All these columns aren't used yet. These are our loads and our CFMs and stuff like that. That's when you start getting into your manual J, manual D stuff, these will get filled out, okay? But we haven't got to that point yet. The other table is, let me go to Windows. So here's our windows. If I highlight them here, they highlight them on the drawing. So I placed five windows. You can also just click on the first one and use the down arrow to scroll through them, like so. Okay. It tells us the room. So we typed in those room names. So that's where it shows up here. Here's our type. That was from our default from our library. If I want to change, let's say this front window is a different kind of window, I can highlight it and then I come up here and then just pick a different one from our libraries. If one of these is not what I want, I have to go back to the library, create a new one, and then when I come back to this drop-down list, it'll be in there, okay? It shows the direction relative to the front of the house. It shows the azimuth of the windows relative to our north arrow. Let me show you the north arrow really quick. I'll drag it, say, I believe Control will let me drag it closer. So if I come in here, we have a north facing, the north arrow is up, which means the front of this house is facing south. And so any windows on the front of the house should be facing south, and they are. Okay. Now, if I just drag this north arrow to a different direction, it doesn't automatically change these just yet. I actually have to click out of the windows and then back into it. Now it's all, you see southwest, northwest, southeast, southeast. So it changed all those windows. Okay. So let me change those back. Now they're all back where they were. It shows the tilt. You can place skylights on here and it'll tell you the tilt of those skylights. It'll tell you the area. So 6040, 24 square feet for the 6040. We had a couple 4040s at 16. And then it tells you what they're adjacent to. What's on the opposite side of conditioned space? What's on the other side? What is that window touching? And these are all touching outside or exterior, okay? If you want to model overhangs, here is the height. Height is the distance between the top of the window and the overhang. And then the overhang length is the distance from the face of the window, how far out the overhang extends past the face of the window. So you can type those in here directly. We had toyed with it. We had a version where you could actually draw the overhangs. You could draw a roof, but it just got really, really complicated. It was actually more work to draw an overhang than to come in and just type those two dimensions into it. But maybe at some point we'll have sort of a combination of those two things, okay? So there you go for windows. The next thing is walls. They're pretty straightforward. It's numbers.
Russ, if you would just for demonstration purposes, just enter an overhang and
oh yes, good idea. Just
so we can demonstrate it does propagate over to energy gauge, please.
Yep, good point. So let's say on this front window here, let's say there's a 4 foot, no, 1 foot above it and sticking out 4 feet, okay, on this front window right there. Okay, thank you. All right, walls. So it automatically numbers. There's 9 walls in this little tiny house, okay? 9 walls. And that's because we did it room by room, and it's tracking the walls by each room, because the idea is to eventually do a room by room manual J load calculation on this house. Again, if you're not planning to do a manual J load calc, you don't need to do it room by room, and you just have one big box to cover the whole thing. Okay, but it automatically assigns wall names, just numbers, wall 1, wall 2. Okay, and I'm going to highlight the first one. I'm just going to use a down arrow and just scroll through. So there's all the 9 walls. It has the room they're associated with, the type from the defaults, okay, the areas. Let's see, those areas are net areas, so they've subtracted out the windows already. The direction relative to the front of the house, the azimuth, the tilt, the pitch, and then what's on the other side, okay. Let's see, let me just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go back and put that garage here. And just for demonstration, I'm going to say, call that unconditioned garage. And then just for kicks, I'm going to put a room here. I'm going to call that earth. And I'm going to shrink it down so that it's only covering half of that wall. Okay. Now, if I go back to the data table, to the walls, you'll see that 2 walls are adjacent to unconditioned space, that one and that one, and 1 wall is adjacent to earth. But notice it's only looking at the bottom part of that. It's actually separated the areas of this bottom part that's below grade and this top part that's not below grade. So just by setting the height of this earth wall out here, it's automatically doing below and above grade wall calculations for you. So that's pretty cool. You have a lot of walkout basements and things like that, where the first floor might actually have a diagonal line for the grade line, and so you have these triangle shaped below grades. We can actually accommodate that as well. We have triangle shaped boxes and pyramid shaped boxes and all kinds of different stuff like that too. So let me go ahead and delete those. Go back to data, and they should all have gone away. Yep. Okay. All right. Let's see. The other thing is walls, doors. There's only 1 door type, but there's 2 doors in here, the front and the back. Ceilings. There's 5 ceilings, 1 for each room. They come up to the default type. It's got the areas and so on. Floors, same thing, 1 for each room. Haven't drawn any ducts yet. And then for roof, we're going to say there, you have to tell it, there's just a couple pieces of information it needs to know about roof. So let's go ahead and go to the roof tab really quick. And the only thing it really needs to know is the pitch of the roof. And so let's say it's a 4 and 12 pitch. So 412. By checking this box, you're telling it that I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to type it in manually. Okay. However, if I wanted to draw a roof, I could. And it's kind of like rooms. You just place a roof, and then by dragging these little handles around, there's a vertical move, brings up a little extra button here, and then top node match partner height. So if I want to make this node the same height as this one, I just click on that button. Oops, I gotta bring them both up. It's doing the one that I just drew. Bring that one up. Now they'll match. Okay, so there's a little roof there, and you can make it a, you can make it a hip roof by pulling them in like that. And then you can put on multiple roofs and build a really complicated roof if you wanted to. If you just want, and it's purely visual at this point. All the software needs to know is that it's a 4 and 12 pitch. Okay, but it does kind of make the model look a little neater, a little more realistic to have a roof on it if you want to. Also, if you're drawing ducts in an attic, this is a good way to show you how much room you have to draw ducts. And when you start drawing your ducts start protruding out through your roof, you know that you're a little cramped for space. Okay, that does happen quite a bit. Okay, back to data tab. Let's see, Jeff, I think we're ready. Is there anything else? Let me just go through a couple of the other.
Did you want to add an air handler?
Yeah, I'm going to need to do that before we go back to energy gauge. But I want to make sure I cover all the controls and stuff. Right. I've already mentioned some of these things. Camera speed, perimeter. It really only shows up with another tool. Let's see, show lengths. That gets into our duct drawings. The grid in the background. You can turn that grid on and off. See the grid down there. You can turn it on and off. You can make it lighter and darker. And then down here, if I want to turn off the roof, I drew the roof, but it's kind of getting in the way of seeing stuff. So I can just turn it off by unchecking that box. You can make the rooms lighter, more opaque, and less opaque by using the slider. Same thing with the floor plan if you want to turn it off for whatever reason. We do have an undo and redo button down here. That's basically Control Z and Control Y. but it's a little different. That's actually a very complicated thing to program in. If you delete a room and that room was made up of multiple blocks, when you delete it, it deletes everything. But when you hit redo, it rebuilds it back one block at a time. You just have to kind of play around with that and get that to work. It's a very useful tool, but it doesn't work exactly like Control Z. If you live your life relying on Control Z to get you out of a jam every once in a while, you're definitely going to want to kind of get used to it in this software, because it works a little bit different. But we have it works for the important stuff. Like if you inadvertently delete something, it will undelete it. You know, things like that. So it does work fine for that. In our tables up here, we have some these controls down here in the lower left-hand side to sort of control the tables, if you will. So if I wanted to see, if we had multiple floors in this house and I only wanted to see rooms for certain floors, these check boxes will control that. If I only want to see conditioned spaces, this controls that. If I want to also see unconditioned spaces, for whatever reason, it will control all that as well. And then once you get all these tables built, like these windows, you've got all these window information, you got all these walls, doors, ceilings, and floors. If for any reason you wanted to export those tables into a spreadsheet, maybe for, I don't know, for cost estimating purposes or anything like that, you can do that with this export tables as CSV. It will export the table as a comma separated value file, which can then be imported very easily into a spreadsheet, and you can do whatever calculations you want. Every piece of information in these tables, all of the tables, gets exported, and then you can do whatever you want to. So that's just a handy feature that people have asked us to put in here. Let's see, I think that's about it. You can print out the tables if you want to. It'll create a printable table as well. And let's see. Oh, one of the other things I forgot to mention, in rooms, when you click on a room, down here in the lower left-hand side, it'll tell you the size of the room. So this room, the width is 15, the length is 10, and the height is 8. Okay, so if that's useful to you, that's where that information is. There's a warning down here. If you go do your load calculations and then you come back and you add a window, this will pop up saying, hey, you've changed something that's going to change your loads. Make sure you redo your load calculations. And it just kind of defaults when you build a house, it shows up there. If I were to go do the load calculations and come back, that error message would go away. So under HVAC draw, there's a whole lot of stuff here. This is a big part of the software, is drawing ducts and things like that. But for the purposes that we need today, all we need to tell it is that this house has one air handler. So I'm just going to click on air handler and I'm going to hit Control click, and it defaults to a horizontal furnace. Okay. And you can change the size of this thing however you want to. Okay. If I click on here, here's all the dimensions for that box. So you've got your return plenum, your fan box, your coil box, and your supply plenum. And you can change those. You can squash it down to make it look like a little soffit mounted pancake unit, you know, a little ducted mini split. You can make it look like a ductless mini split if you want to, and just hang it on a wall somewhere in the house. But all that's there. You can make it an upflow unit. You can make it a downflow unit, or you can go back. I'll go back to horizontal. So we'll just call it a horizontal unit in this house. Okay. All right. So there we go. I think we're ready. I'm going to go ahead and click return to energy gauge and then hand it back to Jeff, and he's going to show you what happened in energy gauge because we built this little house.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Russ. So as you can see, you've come back. All of the entries on this page are the same. When you actually go to the climate tab, you'll want to select a climate. That will be necessary. When you transition to the envelope page, you're going to see something a little bit different. On the top of each page, there's a little message here. It says view only mode, Kwik Model 3D project. And that's important because if you look down below, all of these spaces that were identified in Kwik Model are identified here. And the geometry associated with this is coupled exactly to the Kwik model file. So we don't want to make any edits here, because then we have diverged from the other file, and we have two completely separate files with separate information. So there's a way you can decouple these, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But as you transition through all of the envelope tabs, you'll see that on top, with the exception of the infiltration, because this one was not entered in Kwik model. So we're dealing with a proposed file, and here you can just go ahead and enter your ACH 50. When you transition to the equipment page, you can see all of your blocks are identified. Your cooling is not here. So these are required inputs and the selection of the block. And you can see the name came over from Kwik model, so you don't have to enter that again. And again, simple selection. We'll just assume it's a heat pump at this point. And ducts at this point, we did not draw the ducts at, we don't have the ability to transport that information to energy gauge yet, but that's in the works. So right now you just identify your QN, select the system it's assigned to, and then you can jump over. You have your water heater and your lighting. Those are all the same. There aren't any changes there. As I mentioned, you do have the ability to say, okay, I don't want to work with the Kwik model file any longer. I want to separate from that or decouple from it. So if you notice, there's a little input down here called Kwik model 3D entry. At this point, if you say no, you're going to get a little pop-up or a warning that says that once you do this, you cannot go backwards. Okay, you cannot couple those files any longer, because it's assuming that you're going to possibly make a change to your envelope. Okay, and at this point, if you say yes, I understand that, I agree to it, you get another warning, final warning. Okay, at that point, if you select yes, the two files will be separated. Now we're already working on a way that should remove that warning that allows you to go backwards. Well, I won't go into detail, but we're working on that, as well as other features here. So at this point, you could use this for running HERS, for generating registration files. I would just separate, or you're going to have to separate the 3D envelope at this point, just as we did. Just continue with that, diverge from that. Our next release will overcome that. So once you run HERS, you would generate the RGU file in the same manner as you do currently. You just create the RGU file and upload that for registration.
Give me 1 second. I'll open up a more complex house. This is one we use in a lot of our training. Just to kind of give you an idea. And this is actually a fairly simple house too, but it's more of a typical ranch style home. You can see it has some vaulted ceilings in it, and you can see I've drawn the ductwork. This is very common type of new construction system in California. Horizontal unit up in the attic, all flex duct with ceiling registers. Okay, this kind of gives you an idea, you know, that it will do a fairly complex house. You'll see there's rooms that are made of multiple boxes. Like this room here is, you know, some little triangles to build this bay window and things like that. Okay, and then all these ducts have been sized according to Manual D. The room by room load calcs have done according to Manual J, and it's a lot of fun. So it's, you know, it's something that I've been using the existing software for HVAC design since it came out in the late 80s, early 90s, and I've never been happy with any of the software that's available for residential HVAC design. And so basically I said, hey, got my son and said, hey, let's make our own. Let's make one that's fun to use, that works, that's easier for people to use. One of our main goals is to make load calculations easier for people to do so that more people do it. I'm really trying hard to make it easy for existing homes. That's why we created our field draw tool. But as you can see, it's a really neat useful, fun interface for building a 3D model of a house, which can be used for all kinds of stuff. And we're very happy to have partnered with FSEC to have it be the front end to their energy gauge. So we hope you guys will look at it, play with it, let us know how it's working for you. We are famous for adding features that people have requested. So if you have any ideas, they're very easy for my son to put new features in the Kwik model. He's quite happy to do it. So